All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's like magic. We just switched over from Wish, now it's Love Letter Month 2. I'm Sherry Shish, Powered by Quilting, and we are going to do the Month 2 video for my brand new Love Letter Block of the Month. If you are new to this Block of the Month, look at the live for Month 1, and it talks through the first month block for this amazing quilt. This is a 72 by 84 quilt. It is done in a row by row fashion, so this is the actual quilt itself. It's kind of big, it's really hard. That's why I put the image conveniently right there for you. So it's done in a row by row fashion. And so month 2, we're going to be doing 2 different types of blocks for 2 different types of rows. Month 1, we did this top section, the DNA helix checkerboard block. For month 2, we're going to do this little really fun star block. Okay? And we are also going to do this pinwheel block. So month 1 did the top and bottom rows. Month 2, we're going to do one inside on both top and on bottom. Okay? All right. So that is what we're doing for month 2. We have fabrics C, D, E, and F for this quilt. Okay? And so what we've done is I've already pre-cut all my fabrics. One of the things that you need to remember, you have some sub-cutting to do for both fabric F and your background, where you are going to be cutting a square on 2 diagonals. Pretty much once you cut the square, make sure to align your rulers to cut diagonal to a diagonal. Don't move your pieces while you're cutting them. I forgot to leave a couple to do that. Sorry about that. And then also on fabric E, those squares you're going to do on one singular diagonal. So make sure you look at the sub-cutting instructions to make sure that you have these squares done. Okay? For the first part, so that top square that we're doing, we are going to be making a lot of half square triangles, okay? So I'm going to first do a demo for that, and then I have some other half square triangles already made, because otherwise you're going to be making a lot of half square triangles and you're just going to be watching me make a lot of half square triangles. So a couple things to note. A couple nice tools to own to make any of my Block of the Month patterns. So that starts with Barn Quilt, that is on Facebook. My Facebook group, Lucky Stars, that's also on Facebook group. And then when I moved to YouTube for Wave Pool, Summer Delight, Wish, and now Love Letter, every single one of these patterns use very common tools. First one is Clearly Perfect Angles. It looks like this. The one on my machine is fairly old. There's some tape on it. I have sections of it torn. I have painter's tape on it for other seam allowance lines for me when I'm bag making, so you don't need to do that for this quilt. You just need the basic Clearly Perfect Angles. It's very handy. I highly recommend. And the other tool that you may want to use are these clearly slotted trimmers, and for this quilt you need, not this one, you need trimmer A, which is this ruler. Trimmer A is really handy. I use it a ton. I also recommend, if you do buy these rulers, that you spray the back with Grippy, because they are naturally very slick and therefore a little precarious when you're trimming up your blocks. With Grippy, what it does is it grips on your fabric and honestly helps your ruler not slide while you're trying to use it. Okay, so I'm using background and our fabric C to make a half square triangle. If you are not using a Clearly Perfect Angles, I would highly recommend you draw a line down the center, because then you're going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of that line. Because I use Clearly Perfect Angles, I align my square with the black marks here on the side and my point on this black mark. Okay, so I do that like so. And I sew down. So as long as my point stays on that black line, we're good. And I will do that on the other side as well. So something like that. reason why I use clearly perfect angles, if you have looked, that square, or this block that we go all the way across multiple times, it's completely made of half square triangles, and I really just don't want to draw all of them. All right? So once you sew both sides, what we're going to do is we're going to split this apart, and then we're going to trim them. Okay? I'm going to use, I like trimming on the print side just so I can see it. I'm going to use my trimmer A, to trim. Like so. That is trimmed. And then once I iron, my half square triangle is done. So there isn't anything else that I need to trim. Now, if you're starting this quilt and you're like, Sherry, I don't have this ruler, and I need to have a different ruler. I have just a normal ruler of some sort. How do I trim my squares? Well, I will show you how to do that. So that's what your half square triangles look like. If you don't have a clearly slotted trimmer, go ahead and take your half square triangle, press it open, and we are going to be trimming these to a fairly small size, but you'll want your ruler a little bigger than this. Square ruler, any size. Honestly, it just needs to be bigger so you can trim it. And then you're going to put that diagonal on the square ruler, on the diagonal that you built, and make sure you see fabric on the side outside of what you're supposed to trim to. And then you're going to trim up outside, oops, and hopefully not move the ruler while you do it like I just did. So you trim two sides, rotate it, and trim the other side. So essentially trimming two sides, rotating 180 to trim the other side. And you're making a lot of half square triangles. So because I didn't want to have you literally watch me make half square triangles, I made enough half square triangles for the block. So there's 16 per block that we're making, and you are making a grand total of 9 blocks. So it's a lot of half square triangles. So what I do for this is I just go and chain piece away. I do everything on one side, I pair them all up, chain piece on the other, and I trim. And then once you have them all trimmed like this, you lay out the way that they're supposed to be in a grid. I now will web piece this entire quilt block, okay? Meaning that you have columns 1, 2, 3, and 4 with rows 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew column 2 to column 1, cut my thread, and this is all chain piece, right? So I have everything kind of connected together. Then I'm going to add column 3 to what I just sewn, cut my thread, add column 4 to what I just sewn, and cut my thread. But while I'm adding these pieces, I'm going to finger press and alternate my seams left, right, left, right, left, right. So when I go to the iron, all my seams are going to go one direction, the other direction, one way, the other way. So they all iron flat into these nice, beautiful 4 rows before I sew the long edges together. Make sense? So we're going to go do that. Hey, Bench. Welcome back. So for column 2, sewing to column 1, right? Column 1 is right side up, column 2 is right side down, and then we're going to sew them together. And we're going to continue to do that. So that was row 1. This is now row 2. Row 3. And if you're wondering, these design boards, like, hey Jerry, how do you make your design boards? Like, those are pretty cool. I have a tutorial also on YouTube on how to make the design boards yourself with some extra batting, some foam board, and a hot glue gun. And I edge them with excess binding from my books. So I've done now rows 1, 2, 3, 4. What I do is as I'm going to sew column 3 to the first row, I'm going to make a decision. Am I pressing my seams to the left or right? In this case, I'm going to press to the right. I'm going to finger press my seam down so when I am done, I can just hit it with an iron and be good. I'm going to take column 3 now and add it to what I just sewed. Okay? Like that. Now I'm going to add the next one, but this next row, I'm going to press my seams to the left. Because I pressed the first row to the right, I'm going to press this one to the left. I'm going to go ahead and take this here. Just mess seams and sew down. So we did right, left, now we're back to right. So this is going to be pressing my seams to the right. So I finger press my seams down so they stay flat. I don't hit it with an iron until the very end, but finger pressing all the way down. So that was right, left, right. Now this is going back to the left. So I'm going to press this seam to the left and add the last one, row 4, column 3, to here. Alright, cut thread, start at the top. I did to the right, I'm going to still press this one to the right. So I'm going to press everything in row 1 to the right. I'm going to add my column 4. This one, row 2, I'm pressing everything to the left. Right? Right, left is how all of these blocks will get pressed. Adding this next one. This one now goes to the right. Chain stitching, so many. I web piece everything I have because if I can lay everything out correctly when I stitch them together, like so, I know my pieces are in the correct orientation. They don't go rotated by accident. Alright, so we have everything sewn together. I actually will go through this last row and finger press just because it is the last row, and that way when I go to the iron, my piece is ready just for me to hit it with an iron versus trying to finagle this last row. So right, left. And then now I'm ready to hit this with an iron. Good. I hope it works because I really love it. I think it will be easier for you. There is nothing more frustrating, in my opinion, than realizing you sewed a row on backwards, or you sewed a block on backwards, or crooked, or upside down, not crooked, but like upside down or something. And I have noticed that I have sewn rows wrong. And usually, I notice while I'm putting the binding on the quilt. It's like, oh, well, that's too late. The quilt top's done. The quilt is quilted. Like, there's no fixing this, right? Like, it's just going to live like that. And since I found web piecing, I find it very difficult to do that. Okay? So now, we have our block, but we're all kind of connected for chain piecing. So if I have all my blocks like this, I can walk away. Because if a big wind blows away, all your blocks are connected, and your pieces are still in the correct orientation. So the next step that I will do is I will go ahead and sew rows 1 and 2 together. You can go through and pin each of these. What I find with something this small, if I was making this and these blocks were like twice this size or even a time and a half this size, I would probably pin, but because of the size that these are, they're actually really small. So I tend to hold my seams, but you can feel free to pin if you would like. But I tend to hold my seams, and what I mean by that is I nest and I put my finger here, and I'm holding that seam all the way down until I get close, and I get to that seam and I hold, and then I double check my next seam, and then I check my next seam after that to make sure everything is nesting correctly. Make sure everything's good. Now, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to fold this one over, I'm going to rotate this 180 because I like having my small piece onto the large piece. You can do it the other way. I just personally like sewing small pieces onto a larger piece, so that's just on me, right? I'm going to go like that. We got that there. Double check my seam in the middle. Like so. Adjust everything coming down. And we're done. We're going to open this up and we're going to fold over our last row to what we just sewn. so. There. Alright, so now we essentially have our block. It's not pressed, but all the rows are sewn together. And so now I'm going to go to my iron and press all my rows. And we're just going to press all my rows in a singular direction. So now we have finished month 2, block A. And you're going to make 9 of these because that's what is going to be for the entire row. Block B, on the other hand, so that takes care of that. Block B is a pinwheel, which is going to be using these pieces together. You make 4 of them to make one block. So I'm going to make you one demo. I have some other ones that I've already made to do the final block assembly, but we're going to do this here. Okay, so once you have your quarter square triangles, we want to sew these together first, like so, before you add in this triangle. Okay, now right sides together, I typically like having the piece go through my machine because we're going to sew this way. I like having the right angle go through the machine, so I actually like having it go through this direction. Okay, this way through the machine versus the point. If you go through the point, what happens then is sometimes if you're using a larger hole or a needle hole plate or something like that, that point gets sucked down into your machine, and that's what I like to call your machine eats your piece. So, if I sew it in this direction, when I open it, that still long triangle is still like in the correct shape, right? So I'm going to iron that. Now, we're going to add in this triangle. Now, how do we actually do that, right? You're like, okay, well, I have a half square triangle here, half square triangle here. Do I align it with the corner? Do I align it here? The way that I align them is this diagonal line, that raw edge is the raw edge. So you want to keep raw edges together. This point, do you see this point here? I'm going to over-exaggerate it. The point is going to be where the 2 different fabric lines meet. That's how I'm going to align my piece. So I'm going to center it, essentially that point, and these raw edges together, like so. Okay? And then I'm going to essentially sew all the way down. One of the things I will say, be careful with your bias edges because these are all bias edges because we cut on the diagonal. So we have this, and I'm going to show you how to trim this 2 different ways. Okay, so this is kind of the piece that we need, like so. And I'm going to show you how to trim it using the clearly slotted trimmers, trimmer A, and I'm also going to show you how to do it with a normal ruler. So with A, very similarly, we're going to use a stitch line here to follow the bottom stitch line. And then trimmer A also has the center diagonal line, which is going to be where these 2 meet. So this should be a perpendicular line, and you're going to align it with your clearly perfect angles, perpendicular line, and your stitch line, and you're going to trim like so. So notice how easy that was to do modified hourglass block. So this is very similar how to trim an hourglass block and what I call a modified, right? So a modified hourglass block is half. The reason why I had you cut everything out into quarter square triangles or half square triangles and make them like this is because when you make them like we make our hourglass blocks and you just make it with a square, you're going to have these quarter square triangles rotated like backwards. So there's a type A and a type B, where this is print, background. The other one would be background, print. And we want all the same modified hourglass block. So that's why I have you cut them into quarter square triangles in this case. You should not try to make them with a square and a half square triangle, because otherwise you will literally have two, like half of your modified hourglass blocks backwards, and it's not really fixable that way. Alright, so that's one way to cut it, or trim it. I have a couple others here. And then I have another one that I sewn that I'm going to say, okay, so say like I don't have this ruler. How do I trim this block? And what I will say is I'm going to go ahead and iron this open, right? So a lot of this time I want to iron it open. And I'm going to use a ruler that is larger than what I need to trim it down to, okay? And in this case, this gets trimmed down to 3.5, so anything larger than that, like so, okay? And I want my diagonal line to follow my diagonal line here, okay? And what happens now is I need to make sure I have fabric on all four sides, but when I look at my 3.5, one of them needs to intersect where this print and background change color. So if I have it too far over here, that change color is in the wrong spot. If I have it too far the other way, it needs to be centered where my diagonal line is where my print is, like that change for that diagonal, and my 3.5 needs to be where the purple and the background change color. It gets a little bit trickier, right? So you have that, you trim two sides, and then you trim the other two sides by rotating your block 180, like so. So that is how you trim up that block. All right, so you make multiples of these. You make 48 of them, because at the end of the day, you will need to make 12 blocks, all right? And so this 12th block looks like this. So we are making a pinwheel at the end of the day, okay? And because this is a grid, I'm going to sew these two together, press my seams, and then sew the side. So you make 4 of these to make one block. You need 12 of them. So overall, you're making 48 of these modified hourglass blocks. Okay. So very similar to web piecing. I'm not going to cut the chain piecing between the two. I'm going to leave them, because that way, in case I need to go take a break, do something else, my block essentially is still kept together in the correct orientation. And so now I'm going to go ahead and press my seams in opposite directions. So when I sew this together, my seams nest. Alright, so now this is what my block looks like. I have a top row and a bottom row. I'm going to fold them right sides together. I'm going to pin in the middle and sew the 2 rows together. For pinning, I use these really nice fork pins. My seams nest together where you have your chain piecing, right? And then I'm going to pin on either side of my seam, go in and out. I kind of like give myself enough space to really hold them. And now those seams don't move because they have 2 different pins, one on either side. As I get close to the pin in the middle, I do press down to make sure the fabric sits flat. And then I also don't want to hit the pin going 1,000 miles an hour. I do sew over these pins. They are thin enough. They're the clover fork pins. But I do that because if I hit it very softly, it'll just sew right over it. It'll slide over it. But if I hit it at, going full speed, I will break my pin, break my needle, and bad things potentially happens to my machine. So slow down when you come to the pin. And then now I'm going to press my seam. And voila. We have beautiful month 2 block B. Okay? So you are making 12 of block B, 9, I believe. Yeah, 9 of block A, and this is month 2. All right, so next month, June 15th is going to be Love Letter month 3, but that is also still going to be Wish month 6. So the other block of the month that is running at the same time is Wish. And we will be doing Wish first at noon on my YouTube channel right here. So we'll do month 6 of Wish, take a little break between, and then we'll come back and do month 3 of Love Letter. Starting in August and July, we'll have the Wish Assembly. July will then start only Love Letter, and that all of these streams will start at noon Central Time. But until then, happy sewing. And if you have any questions, comment below. You can reach out on Twitch and or on Discord. And I'll see if I can't get you an answer as soon as possible. I hope you are enjoying the warmer weather, and I hope you're enjoying this block of the month as much as I am. I hope you have a great month. Talk to you soon. Bye.